Welcome to Jesus Christ Prison Ministry and another video Bible study. Our topic, the Book of John, the Denial, Part 3. This is based on John 18, verses 12 through 17. Then the soldiers, along with their commander and the Jewish officers, arrested Jesus and tied him up. First, they brought him to Annas, because he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the person who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one man die for the people. It was the Sadducees who were always to sit as high priest. They were the descendants of Aaron. According to Abraham Geiger, the Sadduceical sect of Judaism drew their name from Zadok, the first high priest of ancient Israel, to serve in the first temple, with the leaders of the sect proposed as the Kohanim, priest, the sons of Zadok, descendants of Eleazar, son of Aaron. That comes from Wikipedia. How sad, how far the priests had fallen. They should have been the first to acknowledge Jesus as the rightful owner of the temple. They should have been the ones to acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah. If they had looked into, instead of at, the temple system, they would have seen the sinless life of Jesus portrayed. They should have seen in Jesus the ultimate high priest. But the system became their God, and they were in no mood to give up their power, wealth, and influence that came with it. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Since the other disciple was known to the high priest, he accompanied Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. Peter, however, stood outside the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the gatekeeper and brought Peter inside. The young woman at the gate asked Peter, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" "I am not," he replied. John truly loved Jesus. He followed Jesus right into the church pit of evil. He was willing to accept whatever came to Jesus as his own. He was not going to deny his Lord and Master. It was the church that first denied Jesus as the Messiah. It started with Zechariah. The church refused to accept his testimony that the son born to him would be the forerunner of the Messiah. Then about a year later, the church refused to accept the testimony of the shepherds. 2 years later, the Magi came to town looking for the King of the Jews, and this was unacceptable to the church. They were not willing to accept Jesus as the rightful owner of the vineyard. That was followed by the slaughter of hundreds of boys. 30 years later, there was the testimony of John the Baptist. But no, the church leaders would not accept anything that did not originate from church leadership. At this time, Peter is given an opportunity to acknowledge Jesus as his master. However, Peter was not yet ready to give his life for Jesus. Peter still had way too much pride, ego, and church in him to surrender to Jesus as his master. He was willing to follow as long as he got what he wanted. He was willing to follow as long as his ambitions were fulfilled. But as he looked around him, he began to realize that those ambitions were not playing out as he had fantasized. Maybe it was time to deny that he knew Jesus. And so it will be with those who go to church. What eventually saved Peter was the fact that he had left the church 3 years before and had spent those years traveling with and listening to Jesus. His love for Jesus grew and grew over those years. Therefore, now, when the test came, even though he denied him at this time, his love for Jesus would overcome that denial, and he would eventually be willing to die for Jesus as his Messiah. If you are sitting in church, you also will become as those who denied Jesus. But if you leave your church now, go to Jesus, falling in love with him by living in obedience to him. When the time comes, your love for Jesus will overcome your human tendencies, and you will be willing to die for Jesus. Get out now. Time is running out. Thank you for joining JCPM and Jesus Christ for another video Bible study.